this video, I'm going to be reviewing the AnyCubic Kobra S1. The Kobra S1 is AnyCubic's fully enclosed FDM 3D printer. It comes in two flavors. You can buy it as a standalone printer, or you can buy it as a combination with the Ace Pro filament feed system. I'll be going over all of the machine's key features, ease of use, print quality, and a lot of the results of the prints that I've been doing for the past couple of months, and the good and the bad. Just a quick disclaimer before we get started. AnyCubic did send me the machine for review. However, I am not being paid for this video, nor was I coerced, threatened, or given bodily harm in exchange for a good review. If anything, I'm brutally honest. And with that, let's go ahead and get started. First, let's hop through the features of the machine. It's fast. It can print up to 600 millimeters per second. Mind you, just because it can doesn't mean that you should. It really depends on what it is that you're printing. The print volume is 250 millimeters cubed. That's almost big enough to print a Mandalorian helmet. Almost. I guess if you don't have a small head like mine. It's compatible with all types of filament, though primarily I tested with PETG and PLA filaments. It has an internal camera so that you can monitor the print remotely, which of course also means that it's Wi-Fi capable. You can initiate the print from the slicer itself. You can even do it through an app available for your phone. If you get it as a combo, then it will come with the Ace Pro. The Ace Pro lets you have up to 4 filaments, and you can daisy chain them so that you can have a total of 8 possible filaments for a single print. The Ace Pro actually has a dryer inside of it, so you don't need a completely separate device to dry your filaments out, which if you're not familiar with FDM printing is pretty flippin' important. You can print and dry at the same time, which of course leads into the fact that the machine can do multicolor printing. I find that multicolor printing is a little bit wasteful. I would much rather just print single color and snap things together in the end. But to each their own. So now that I've covered some of the features, why don't we talk about the ease of use? AnyCubic boasts that the user should be able to open the box and have the machine up and running within 15 minutes. At least in my experience, I was able to have everything set up and running within about 25 minutes. That's without any kind of leveling or tweaking or dialing in of settings. I just took it out of the box, set it up, and got Benchy going. So yeah, you can be up and running about 15 to 30 minutes. But your prints aren't going to be the best that they can possibly be until you dial in settings. Now for an absolute beginner, you probably don't realize you have to do that. You probably have no clue what Z offset is, or flow rate. What about bed temperature? All of these things matter, and they lead to the best possible results. So as for the 15-minute claim, yeah, it's true, but with the caveat of not for the absolute beginner. Though I think it's important to point out that while I have a lot of experience with a 3D printer and know exactly what it is I want to squeeze out in terms of performance and quality, your average user probably doesn't even give a hoot. They're not going to notice the same things that I notice. So take that into consideration. Having a level machine bed is crucial for 3D printing success. The Kobra S1 has the ability to auto-level the bed. In the slicer's remote print window, it's actually turned on by default. This makes it easier on beginners since they might not understand the purpose of bed leveling or how often it should be done. Flow calibration is also an option you can toggle on, though this is something I personally prefer to test and set on my own for each filament brand and type. All of these calibration options are also available from the LCD panel on the machine. Speaking of the slicer, AnyCubic Slicer Next is their recommended software. If it looks similar to other brand slicers, that's because they're all based off of Orca Slicer. It will be the simplest solution for less experienced users. Like other brands, AnyCubic has a well-curated library of models that have been freely shared by their community. You can actually find some really cool models to print. Typically, the number of downloads is a solid indicator on if the listing will print well. Some can be pretty janky, so make sure to read any community comments and ratings before printing. Using the Ace Pro is fairly simple. Place the spool in one of the slots so that the filament is unwinding from the top. You know, like your toilet paper, if you aren't a gremlin. Trim the end of the filament with clippers to make a 45-degree angle, then insert the filament into the corresponding orange feed hole. To remove a filament from the Ace Pro, select the slot you want to free up from the LCD panel and touch the retract button. When it's done retracting the filament from the machine, you can gently pull it out of the Ace Pro. Now, I'm sure you've noticed that I have some extra doodads on my Ace Pro. These are some community tools that I printed to help the filament feed with less friction to the orange end entry. Based on community feedback, the angle of the filament going into the hole can etch the back of the orange entry hole over time. These aren't major concerns, just something to be aware of. Let's go through some print results. I started with Benchy first. This is a little tugboat model that's typically used for benchmarks and testing to get the right settings for both machine and individual filaments. For a first print without putting in any of my own settings, these are decent results. I noticed that the overhang areas were a little lumpy and the hull had some weird layers where it met the deck. After drying the filament for 4 hours and fine-tuning the flow calibration for this particular filament, I got a very nice Benchy. As I moved on to more complex prints, I noticed a weird tearing between layers around overhangs. I printed it on my X1C to see if the problem was with the model, but it came out just fine. When it wasn't reproducing on the X1C, I installed Orca Slicer with the Kobra S1 profiles to see if it happened there. That print turned out great. Clearly the machine was fine, so what was going on? Well, after a great deal of research, it turns out it's the slow down for overhangs flag under the speed settings in the slicer. If you turn that off, the problem goes away and you get a great print. Here you can see the Kobra S1 print in green and the X1C print in gray. Though they are different colors, both filaments are Polymaker Polychroma PLA. I reported it to AnyCubic so they could look into it further. This is something that can be easily resolved with firmware updates. I also did an overhang torture test. It didn't really show any signs of stress until 60 degrees for the deeper slope, and then 70 degrees for the shallower, taller slope. After dialing in my settings, prints were looking really good. Take this mask for example. I printed this with a multicolor silk PLA. Usually silk PLAs are a pain in the butt to use, but I didn't need to even do anything special with this. I just dialed in a generic setting for PLA and went with it. So to me, that's actually pretty impressive. And I have a high bar. I didn't just do boring tests though. I wanted to print fun things. What's the point of having a cool 3D printer if all you're gonna do is print calibration cubes and tugboats? I started simple with things that wouldn't require supports, then gradually introduced more complex items like keycaps and figurines. Their complexity is due to their smaller size, which makes it harder to squeeze out detail not normally achievable with FDM printers. Honestly, I'm impressed they came out looking this good. Usually I print things like this on a resin printer. It may be shocking to some, but I'm an absolute freak for desk organization. It's my kink. Don't shame me. The desktop IKEA Skatus was probably the cutest thing ever sculpted. I'll die on that hill. What about threads? Well, I'm happy to say they print quite well. This game cartridge case was my first print with threads, followed by a cactus with a compartment for hiding your chocolate. Check out the detail on the knit texture though. Pretty awesome, right? I even printed some of those stupid dragon eggs you see at every other table in convention vending halls. No, really, they're everywhere. They're the low-hanging fruit of the 3D printing farm world. Artisans love to hate them, children love them, parents just want their children to stop crying. My overconfidence knows no bounds, so of course I dipped my toes into some articulated models. Everyone say hi to Gary the Sandworm! The most impressive print was actually an articulated kitsune. A friend was very excited when she found a picture of this figurine, which I immediately reverse image searched and purchased from an artist on Cults. I printed it using a variegated PLA to give the shifting colors look. In total, it was 8 hours of printing and is probably the most beautiful thing I've ever 3D printed. There's a couple of things that I feel are necessary to call out about the Kobra S1. First, the build quality. Now, given the price point of the machine and it being about half the cost of machines with similar features, the build quality is consistent with the price point. These are just things that you need to consider. They're not going to make or break the machine. First, the doors. There's a door here and a door here. Both of them are plastic. For similar enclosed FDM printers, usually these are some sort of plexiglass or glass. So plastic is just a little flimsy. In all of the promo images, the Ace Pro is sitting on top of the machine. That's problematic when you have a plastic window on top. This comes off of the machine, and that's largely because when you're printing with some types of filaments like PLA, you need to have a little bit more air in there. So the issue with the top door being plastic is it's bendy, and the Ace Pro is not necessarily the most lightweight thing in the world, which is why I have it on the side and not on top. Now, if you opt to get the S1 without the combo, including the Ace Pro, there's a spool holder that's on the back of the machine. So you need to leave a lot of room in the back so that you can access it, or just resort to turning the machine around as you change filament. Now right now this machine is powered on, which means you could see the lights, if the lights were decent. The internal lighting is extremely minimal. And while you can buy internal lighting kits right off of Amazon, that's something you probably shouldn't have to do. It doesn't affect a whole lot, but it does make that camera lag just a little bit. Which leads me into a point about that internal camera. It's not terribly high resolution, so you're gonna get a lot of blurring, strobing, and noise. So it might be harder to spot problems on a smaller screen. The things I've mentioned so far aren't a big deal. There's two things that you might want to actually consider though, and this depends on your level of experience with FDM printers and how comfortable you feel tinkering with your machine. First up, I like to use matte PLAs. Matte PLAs are notoriously a little fussy. The crux of the problem is that the matte PLA being ever so slightly smaller than a typical PLA filament means that the gears in the Ace Pro aren't able to grab onto it and pull it through to the extruder. So there are some tricks out there that you can employ to get it to work, but it'll violate your warranty. And I'll just hint at it now that it has something to do with orthodontic rubber bands, of which I have plenty because I have teenagers. But again, that'll violate the warranty. Note that this is only a big deal if you care about using matte PLA, specifically matte PLA from the Ace Pro. You can still feed it from the single spool in the back of the machine and it'll be just fine. So it's not the end of the world. It's just a little inconvenient. And I should point out that AnyCubic does plan to have this resolved in version 2 of the Ace Pro. Number 2, in full disclosure, I did have to replace the machine bed. The original bed that came with my machine was concave in the center, and ultimately, while not terribly severe, it was enough to throw off things for like the chessboard that I tried to print. I basically had to avoid printing in the extreme corners. But as a huge kudos to AnyCubic's customer support staff, they were fabulous. They listened to me. They provided me help, they were extremely responsive, and they offered to send me a brand new machine bed. And they had no idea that I was an influencer. Evil. See, I didn't bother telling them that I had gotten the machine from their company representatives for a review. And the reason that I did that is because typically if you're a reviewer or an influencer, whatever, you're gonna get priority care from customer support. That's not representative of the experience that your average consumer is going to get. So I'm really happy to say that I received the new machine bed in less than 10 days, and it took about a half hour to install and then auto level. So why am I bringing this up when I could very easily have omitted it? Because I wanted to highlight how helpful they were and how much I appreciated that. So now let's go over my final thoughts. Like I mentioned earlier, I spent 2 months testing the machine. And despite everything that I mentioned in the previous section as things that you should take into consideration, once I had everything kind of dialed in, my prints were just as good as the ones that I would get off of my Bamboo Labs X1C, which, considering the differences in price and build quality, is pretty impressive. Ultimately, what I would say is that if you're okay with testing and dialing in settings and maybe tinkering a little bit with the machine itself, then the price point for what you get out of it is unbeatable. It is half the cost of similar machines. And yeah, there are trade-offs for that, like plastic doors or a lower quality internal camera. But only an absolute idiot would take two machines from completely different price points and compare them as if they were equals. It's not apples to apples, it's apples to oranges. At the time of recording, the Kobra S1 combo is being sold for $459. That's nuts! It's a great value for what you're gonna get out of it. You just have to go in with an open mind and the willpower to dial in settings. Thank you so much for your undivided attention. If you have any questions regarding the AnyCubic Kobra S1, feel free to leave them in the comments section below the video. I also love dad jokes and compliments about my hair. If you want to contribute to my attention-seeking antics, give the video a like and subscribe to the channel.